So the rise of regional New South Wales and 600,000 new reasons why you should follow these towns.
Regional areas are sort of misunderstood in many respects for investing, but we are seeing a few towns with significant population growth and good growth within the property market, and affordable markets for investors to be getting into. So it's one worth discussing.
New South Wales population is forecast to hit 10 million.
A lot of those people are downsizing and buying in more affordable markets, therefore they're paying cash.
House prices rose by 60% from 2020 to 2023.
Over 3 years.
Over 3 years.
That's massive.
100%. So we're basing today's episode off the New South Wales Infrastructure Report that was released in 2024, which outlines which areas are going to grow by 2041.
Yeah.
So a lot of what we are talking about today isn't our data. It is New South Wales government's data. You'd have to assume that they know what they're talking about. But as a bit of a summary, New South Wales population is forecast to hit 10 million and 70, up from 8.1 million in 2021. So over a 20 year period is quite a lot of growth, and 600,000 people of that are going to live or move into regional New South Wales.
Yeah, taking the total to 3.8 million. So it is pretty significant still as population growth, population total.
So what we're going to be talking about is where are they going? What does that actually mean for people wanting to invest in property? And does the infrastructure and planning allow for it?
Yeah. Short answer for me is no.
So New South Wales is going to go up by 1.97 million from 2021 to 2024, which we've already discussed. So that's an annual average growth of 1.1%, which is quite strong, I guess, if you want to call it that. Net overseas migration will contribute to 1.7 mil from these people. New South Wales will lose around 400,000 people due to interstate migration.
Likely due to affordability.
So likely going to Queensland or Victoria in a lot of cases. And there will be a natural increase of around 700,000 due to births. So minus deaths.
Overseas migration is contributing an extra million people compared to the natural birth just within New South Wales. The average growth rate of 1.1%, we always talk about at the high level, just population to dwellings. Dwellings going to grow at the same rate at 1.1%. I would suspect not, but we would need to do more research around that.
So one thing to note is that in 2021, 17.2% of people in New South Wales were aged over 65. That is predicted to grow up to 21% by 2041. So the population in New South Wales is ageing, and that does have an effect on the property market as well.
And one of the big things we'll touch on in here is that although that's only a 3 or 4% increase in that demographic, that demographic will be concentrated. A lot of them moving out of Sydney and sort of those more metropolitan areas, and they're going to these regional towns. And when you think about it from a buyer's perspective, a lot of those people are downsizing and buying in more affordable markets, therefore they're paying cash. So there's a lot more people within the market that aren't dictated by interest rates.
And particularly coastal areas they're moving to out of the ones we're about to talk about. Which we'll get straight into now. So we're going to throw some numbers. So the first one is the major growth centres. So basically this is all in New South Wales. So Wagga Wagga is predicted to go up by 16,300. So that's quite an increase. Albury, 15,500. Dubbo, 10,800. Tamworth, 9,700. Bathurst, 9,100. Now, it doesn't seem like a lot when you talk about it like that, but it is. It is a lot of people.
I mean, projected, so Wagga Wagga is projected to get to 81,000 people. Think about that. At the moment, they're sitting around that 65,000 people. You're increasing that population by a significant amount. And if the dwellings aren't there to support it, obviously that's just simple supply and demand metrics. But one thing to note here is although that Wagga Wagga is the top in terms of population, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the top in terms of growth as well. Because Wagga's typical price is around 800,000 to purchase in, where Dubbo is a more affordable market at around that 650,000. So growth isn't going to be reflective purely on that population basis.
And that growth also doesn't relate back to what the existing population is. So the percentage increases will be different across those as well. So some of the reasons listed in the report is employment. So there's strong employment opportunities, strong university opportunities, good hospitals and regional airports connecting them to major cities are some of the reasons people are moving to these areas. Now, we've already talked about the coastal hotspots, well, why people are moving there. It's a lot of downsizers for retirees. So the biggest is Port Macquarie Hastings region, which is 15,800. Coffs Harbour, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in this episode as well, which is 15,400. Ballina, 9,700. Armadale, which is the south coast, I believe, which is 8,800. Tweed is 15,300.
Yeah, so a lot of people sort of that Coffs Harbour, North Port Macquarie, Coffs Harbour, Ballina and Tweed. There's a lot of people moving up to that northern New South Wales in those coastal towns.
Yeah, and a high population here is sea changers or retirees moving from Sydney and Brisbane.
Yeah.
So they're not too far from anything.
Yeah.
In most cases, they're probably only 3 hours away from a major airport in these cases. So tree change, so people moving a little bit further out. Orange is predicted to have an increase of 10,200. Goulburn is 6,300. Armadale is 5,200.
Yeah. So a little bit less, but still, if there's no increase in supply of dwellings there, there's obviously going to be pressure on that market. And a lot of people, wouldn't suspect, but there is actually infrastructure within these areas as well. We haven't listed it in here. This is purely population. But for example, there's a new development going on for Bathurst Hospital. So in terms of industry within that local economy, there is investment in these areas as well.
Yeah, which puts us on to the next one, which is some of the risks and pressures that may happen. So some of the smaller towns such as Ballina, Coffs Harbour and Armadale are already facing housing shortages. In fact, Coffs Harbour rose by 60%. House prices rose by 60% from 2020 to 2023.
Over 3 years.
Over 3 years.
That's massive.
So that's a really big indication that there is a supply issue in that area. So then we add that extra pressure of adding more people into it.
Yeah.
Where's it going to go?
Yeah.
So there is some mention in the reports of infrastructure lags, such as schools and health facilities in those areas as well. So that is something to keep an eye out for, is what infrastructure is going to be spent in those areas over the next 5 years or so.
Yeah.
If it's substantial, could be a good place to look out for.
And that's the thing is with that infrastructure as well, if we've got that ageing population and the older demographics moving to these regional areas, obviously they're out of the workforce then. So in terms of the labour force, what is that in these regional areas, and how are they going to keep up with the trade shortages for these properties?
And the problem, like it's stated in here, population growth doesn't always mean job creation. The people coming into the area doesn't actually always equal needing more jobs, especially if they're retirees, as you mentioned. So there could be lots of competition for jobs, so very low or very high unemployment levels in some of those areas. So some of the areas are very heavily relied upon on aged care, tourism and agriculture, which sometimes can be risky as well. Generally speaking, you want to invest in areas that have got a diverse economy, not just reliant on one of these.
100%.
So that is something to look out for as well. And so there's been issues, in some of these towns as well with some environmental issues such as flooding and other things.
Flooding has been a big topic, and even locally in Newcastle, I know that doing quotes for clients, insurance premiums have risen so much. Mine personally doubled over the 12 months period from renewal this year, purely from those northern New South Wales flooding events.
So there's some tips from us to look for. So some of these numbers were increasing, 15,000 per town.
Yeah,
I'd advise looking more at the population growth as a percentage, not a number.
Yeah.
So anything that's going to have a 10% growth over that 20-year period is going to be, pretty decent. Any planned hospitals, schools, any of those infrastructure builds that we've mentioned.
And that's pretty easy to find. Type in New South Wales infrastructure, bang, something will come up on Google to find and read about it.
Look for any of these regional areas that are building or expanding their TAFE or education universities. That's another thing to look out for. And anything that's got 2% or lower vacancy rates in those areas indicates a bit of a strong market.
I think there's an opportunity for people, whether it's investors or owner-occupiers, and if they want to move there. But if you're an investor and you want to capitalise on this demographic change, there's an opportunity to still buy within these markets and then resell to those older demographics when you do go to realise your gains. Because 2041, it's still 15 odd years away. So if you're buying now, you hold for that period of time, you sell to someone who is essentially cashed up. They've sold their property and they're paying cash to downsize. So you're reselling to, a motivated buyer.
So some of the suburbs to keep a closer eye on is Albury-Wodonga. So it's cross-border commerce hub.
Yep.
So there's an $80 million health precinct in that area.
Yep.
Port Macquarie, they are expanding the hospital as well. So they're spending a bit of money there. There's very low vacancy rates in that area as well. Orange has got a lot of jobs available in that area. And Wagga has obviously got a lot of government spending out there with the military, which is always a good thing as well. I don't think those bases out there are going anywhere.
There's a lot happening down in Wagga at the moment.
And there's also a university out there as well. There's also the hospital. There's a lot in that area.
Yeah.
So that's us for the regional wrap-up for, I guess, the population growth estimates for the next 20 years, or a bit under that now. But I think in one of our next episodes, we're going to go over some of the other
Metro New South Wales and population demographic changes in each of the locations. But I think wrapping up, one thing to note is that within these regional areas, it is noted in the report that most of the population are going to the city centre itself or the surrounding suburbs to that sort of central hub. The hinterlands of all of these areas are going to have decreasing population. And as a result, likely you're selling your properties for less as well, so less growth in your property prices. So if you are going to buy in these areas, just be mindful that all of the people are going to want to live near the amenities in those locations. So it's probably best buying as close to town as you possibly can.
Yeah, and try and avoid these mega estates that some of these developers are going to start rolling out in those areas because of these numbers.
Yeah.
They're going to build these huge estates on the outskirts of town, which is a lot of supply of a product that not many people want.
There's a lot of, it's very hard to get scarcity in those sorts of things. There are development guidelines on top of your DCPs and LEPs as well. So unless you know what you're doing, it's probably a risky purchase doing it alone.
Well, that's it for today. Thanks for joining.
See you in the next one.